Hey, if you happen to catch the news this morning, you know that Corvallis Police, a little north of here, up the road, are now equipping all of their officers with a substance called Narcan. And what Narcan is used for is it's given to folks who have OD'd from opioids. So, OxyContin, oxycodone, heroin, things like that. And it's nasal spray. Well, it's kind of interesting that in Indiana, apparently folks can get this Narcan. And a study recently showed that many of those folks that were administering Narcan, and we're not talking about ambulance drivers, we're not talking about paramedics, EMTs, police, etc., or doctors, nurses. But it showed that many people who were administering Narcan didn't call 911 afterwards because they were afraid that they would get arrested. And apparently, what they're seeing is that people, essentially are dying. In Indiana, they looked at some of the numbers, and they found that about 1,300 people had picked up these Narcan kits in 23 Indiana counties. And they've administered it. One mother, Justine Phillips, who helped pass the law after she lost her son to a drug overdose 4 years ago. And her thing is, she's saying, we need to convince people to call 911 because we're losing people already. And even with the administration of Narcan, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to survive. To talk a little bit about it this morning, Ryan Davis, he's the program director at Taylor Recovery Center. He's an addiction specialist. He joins us on the Wake Up Call. Ryan, thanks for being with us this morning. So, Narcan, how effective is this in staving off an actual overdose?
Oh, first, thanks for having me on. So Narcan is very effective, and it is definitely highly needed across our country. I've seen, multiple overdoses be overturned just by administering the Narcan shot or the Narcan nasal injection to help save someone's life. So it's definitely much needed.
Okay. So is this something that in some states you just go down and buy it like, you would, cold medicine? And, how do you end up getting your hands on this stuff?
That's correct. In some states, it's available at, your Walgreens and CVS stores. It's available over the counter through the pharmacist without a prescription, which I think should be widespread throughout the country because, opioid addiction's becoming such an epidemic and so dangerous with the heroin and the fentanyl that's on the streets these days. More and more people are overdosing, and we're seeing that. So the Narcan shot definitely needs to be available for everyone to use.
So what is you say that it's effective. The questions that are being raised here is that the folks that have OD'd, somebody has administered the Narcan, they seem to be okay. If it's so effective, then why should they call 911?
Because they still need to seek immediate medical attention for the overdose. So the Narcan will revive them, but still, they may seem okay, but they really do need medical attention from a physician or a doctor to make that final call. I've read about some instances where the Narcan, did revive them from their overdose, and 10 to 15 minutes later, they went right back into the overdose, right to save their because they wanted a first responder to get them the attention that they needed. So even though you're administering the drug, the Narcan, you still absolutely need to call 911.
And then what happens from there? Because these people, the reason they're not calling 911 is because they're afraid of being arrested. So if the idea is that you go down, you pick this stuff up at the store, it's pretty obvious at that point that you really don't want 911 involved. What happens if they do call 911 or they go to a doctor? Are they then putting themselves... Well,
if I had a family member that I knew was in their active addiction, I would definitely have Narcan available on hand just in case of an unfortunate overdose. So, and people need to be aware that there are Good Samaritan laws in place for that fact that if you call 911 and you still would be protected from being, convicted or prosecuted for administering help to someone who's overdosing. So we need to be.
Go ahead.
We need to make sure that people are aware of this law.
Okay, so is that a national law, or does it vary from locality to locality? I know that Indiana,
It is a national law, but some states have different wording and content in the law. So that's why each state has to make their citizens aware of the laws. But it is a national law. It was passed about 4 years ago from a mother who lost her son through an overdose, and someone didn't call 911 for the fear of being arrested by the police.
All right. I'm just kind of curious what, we started this conversation off by you saying that Narcan is very effective. Can you give us an idea of maybe the percentage of the cases where, maybe Narcan will revive, at least temporarily, but they still later go on to OD or potentially even die?
That's a good question. I really don't know those statistics, but I know, just from working at Taylor Recovery Center, when people came in after overdosing and telling me stories about being revived from the Narcan, I've already seen in this year alone already 3 or 4 cases of people being revived by Narcan and it working for them. But they did, after being revived, go seek medical attention at the hospital right afterwards. So just to make sure they were in the clear. So it's definitely working.
All right. Hey, we appreciate you joining us on the Wake Up Call. Are you on your way to the airport or something, by the way?
I'm on my way into the office, actually.
Oh, okay. I hope you're on a hands-free device.
I am.
Yeah, okay, good answer. Ryan, thanks for joining us on the Wake Up Call this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, Ryan Davis.
Researchers in Indiana say in the event of a drug overdose, many people are not calling 911 for help. Addiction specialist and program director at Taylor Recovery Center, Ryan Davis, is on the Kogo News Live line. And Ryan, most of us can't imagine if somebody collapses in front of them, they're going to call 911. So why aren't people doing that?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on this morning. So people aren't calling because, when someone's overdosing, they tend to hesitate. They panic, and then they actually fear arrest if 911 is called and the police arrive on the scene. So that's why most people aren't calling 911, just for the simple fact of fearing arrest and conviction if the police do arrive.
Now, I know that this study was done by researchers at the Indiana State Department of Health, and they show many of the people who don't call 911 are administering something called Narcan. Number one, how is it administered, and how do they get it?
So Narcan is administered in 2 ways. There's a Narcan shot that can be, used as just like an EpiPen would be in the leg area, or there's a Narcan nasal ingestion that you can just spray it up someone's nasal cavity and use it that way. And Narcan's available in a lot of states through, Walgreens or CVS. You can just go pick it up through the pharmacy, and you don't need a prescription or anything like that. And I personally believe it needs to be available everywhere and more widespread throughout our country because of the simple fact of how bad this epidemic of opioid use and how bad it is throughout the country.
Now, what does Narcan do to the opioids? Sorry, I have such a tough time with that word, opioids, in your system.
So it reverses the act of when you're overdosing, it basically just revives you back from the overdose. That's why I think, everyone, if you have a family member that who is in their active addiction and actively using, heroin and fentanyl intravenously, you need to have this on hand. Every treatment center throughout the country or every sober living community throughout the country needs to have a stock of Narcan on hand just in case of unfortunate overdose.
Now, what can we? I mean, is that would be something that maybe federal lawmakers would have to address, or is that on the state level?
It'd probably be on the state level because some states it's available now. So it's usually up to the state government to make it available to patrons to purchase over the counter. So we just need to make it more aware of how effective this medication is being used. And some people would call it enabling, people to use and be able to overdose, but those people who call it enabling really don't understand the disease of addiction, because I guarantee you everyone that comes to my center, Taylor Recovery Center, they want the help. They want to recover, and their brain chemistry is just wired a little different than everyone else's, and they can't stop using even though they want to. So that's why Narcan is so important and needs to be more widespread available for people, to use in case of an overdose.
Now, how can we make sure that people do I'm assuming that these are probably other drug users who they're with somebody who overdoses and they freak out because they think they're going to jail. What can we do to make sure that they do call for help?
So we can't, I don't think there's anything that we can do to force them to call, but we need to make everyone more aware there are Good Samaritan laws that will keep you protected in case you were to call 911 to administer help to someone who's overdosing or in need. So we need to make this more people more aware of these laws. Like I know in New York, they're putting up billboards and they're going on the airwaves and TV to tell people about the Good Samaritan laws, because it's becoming such an epidemic. And 91, I read a study that there's 91 people throughout the country overdosing every day. That's an alarming number. So people need to know that I don't care if you're the person who gave the drug or you're the person who's doing drugs with them, their life is way more important to save than worrying about if you're going to go to jail or not.
All right. He is the program director at Taylor Recovery Center, Ryan Davis, with us on the Kogo News Live line.
Well, we know right here in Northeast Ohio, Stark County, Canton, that there is a huge heroin epidemic, an opioid epidemic that we're dealing with every single day. We talk about Narcan on the radio all the time. It is a major topic of discussion. And now we're finding out that some people are not calling for help in such situations for fear possibly of arrest. We have on our WHBC Newsline right now addiction specialist and program director at Taylor Recovery Center, Ryan Davis. Good morning, Ryan.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on this morning.
We're glad to have you. Talk a little bit about this study that shows that, although they may be, administering Narcan, they're not taking it a step further, are they?
No, that's correct. And the study shows that most individuals, they really don't even recognize the signs of overdose, nor do they understand that 911 should be called. And people tend to hesitate, panic, and fear arrest. And they fear that the police will respond to the 911 call and there will be criminal charges for themselves or for the person who's overdosed.
So what do they do? What would you suggest they do?
I would suggest they definitely call. People need to know that there are, Good Samaritan laws in place for that reason, that when they call a first responder or 911, that they will not face criminal charges just for the simple fact that they're trying to administer help to someone who's overdosing or who's in need.
Now, there's some towns in Ohio. Of course, I'm sure you know the what we deal with here. We're probably the leading state in the country with opioid deaths. But there are some cities that are trying to outlaw using Narcan more than 3 times, or if somebody calls for help with Narcan more than 3 times, then they have to pay for it. There's just a lot of things being kicked around because of how this is affecting so many people and so many agencies. What are your thoughts on that whole situation, on who should have Narcan and who should use it?
Well, I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I think everyone should have the ability to have Narcan on hand, just in case, for the simple reasons, if someone overdosing, Narcan's saving lives. And I don't care if it's 3 or 10 times. I'd rather save someone's life than not give them the ability to, go on with their life because they can't afford it, or we're putting a limit on how many times we can use a Narcan. This medication is really saving people, and we need to keep it available for everyone to have.
Once a person uses Narcan and they're saved, I mean, there are some out there, just, throwing this out to you, there are some out there who say, it's just enabling people because they know they'll be saved in some way. How do we get that person, if they use the Narcan, is that where calling 911 comes in, that maybe that helps them take that next step towards recovery?
Definitely. And Narcan, it does save them, but that's not the last step. They still need to seek immediate medical attention. And, most people that say that it's enabling them to keep on using don't really understand the disease of addiction. It's not that they want to keep on using. At my recovery center, I guarantee you, everyone that comes in, they check themselves in. They're not forced to be there. They want the help. They want to get better. They want to recover. And it's just that their mind and their chemistry in their brain is just telling them something different, that they need the drug. So it's definitely not enabling them. It's only helping at this point.
All right. So make the call is basically what you're telling folks, right?
Oh, definitely make the call. I would not stand around and wait. As soon as you administer the Narcan, you should be dialing 911 to get a first responder there, so they can seek medical attention from a doctor or physician. Because even though they seem to be okay, they're still at risk to get right back into that overdose. I've read about it. People coming out after getting the Narcan shot and going right back into an overdose after they seemed okay after about 5 to 10 minutes. So it's definitely very important for them to call 911 right away.
All right. Some very good information. Program Director at Taylor Recovery Center and Addiction Specialist Ryan Davis. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Pam. Appreciate you having me on.
Up in Indiana, the State Department of Health, they, with some academics, conducted this study that showed that in the case of drug overdose, some individuals are not calling authorities. They're not calling 911. Joining us on the Morning News, he's director of Taylor Recovery Center, addiction specialist Ryan Davis. Ryan, welcome to the show. So are folks afraid that they will be arrested if they call authorities?
First, thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir.
And yes, that's exactly what's happening. Individuals fear that police will respond to a 911 call and there will be criminal charges for themselves or for the person who has overdosed. And it's really a shame because those fears should never keep anyone from calling 911 immediately. It may be a matter of life or death.
The study mentioned Narcan. I guess that's what helps people survive a drug overdose. Would that be an opiate overdose?
Yes, that's an opiate overdose medication. And Narcan is actually accessible to anyone. You can most often and not go to your local Walgreens or CVS, and it's available for purchase. So if anybody with a family member or a spouse or anything is actively using drugs or opiates, this is something that they should definitely have in their possession in case of an unfortunate overdose.
It sounds to me like it's over the counter, Ryan. Is it?
is.
It is over the counter,
correct.
but it's behind the counter. You have to ask a pharmacist.
Right. You definitely have to ask the pharmacist for it, but you can definitely buy it without a prescription or anything. They're making it more available because heroin,
the epidemic
and
that we see.
fentanyl overdose.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes, sir. From Taylor Recovery Center, Ryan Davis, our guest on 710 KURV.
Ryan, Tim Sullivan here. Who is overdosing? Folks who are using these opioids, illegally just to get high, or folks who have been prescribed them for pain. These highly addictive drugs.
Mostly, it's folks that are using it illegally and intravenously. They're shooting up the heroin, they're shooting up the fentanyl. And
whoa, man!
That's the most people that are overdosing. Now, I'm not saying that people that are getting it prescribed to them, they're also overdosing because they're, taking it.
Which one's worse, Ryan? Which one? What do you see more? The prescription or the street stuff?
The street stuff, for sure.
There's still more. But the prescription stuff's catching up, I'm guessing, right? Because we see a lot of these reports, man. It's a flood of reports that we see in the news.
Yeah, it's catching up, and we need to get a handle on that as well. That's the problem. We're getting prescribed these drugs that are so powerful, and they become addicted to them, and then they, in turn, can't get the drugs anymore. They become too expensive, and they start doing the street drugs.
Yeah,
because the cheaper high and same feeling, and that's what's starting to happen.
All right, Ryan, thanks for your time. From Taylor Recovery Center, Ryan Davis, addiction specialist. Thank you for joining us on the Valley's Morning News.
So, we hear a lot about opioids. We hear about heroin. We hear about the epidemic, the people dying.
Huge problem, yeah.
Now we're hearing that some people are not even calling for help. So, want to find out what that is all about. So, addiction specialist Ryan is joining us. This is Ryan Davis, who joins us now from Taylor Recovery Center. He's the program director there. Hi, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great. How are you guys?
We're doing fine this morning. So I'm kind of curious as to what exactly is it? People are not going to call 911. Are they afraid of going to jail?
That's exactly what it is. Most people are afraid. When they see someone overdose, they panic, they hesitate, and they're afraid of arrest. So they really don't know what to do at that point.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, we have seen here in Louisiana, we've seen over the last couple of years, we've seen several deaths. But then we're also seeing the drug Naloxone. I believe, is that how you pronounce it? Is it Naloxone?
Naloxone.
Yeah, Naloxone. Okay, thank you so much. Naloxone with some of the officers in kind of our 7 sort of parish area, which is a county. And we're seeing them being able to have this in their units to be able to help people. But if you can't even get someone to call 911, so these people are choosing what, death? I mean, how is this playing out?
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. Instead of trying to save someone's life, they're afraid of going to jail. So they would rather take the chance of, the person just coming out of it okay on the other end instead of calling 911 or, calling one of our first responders to come and help just because they're afraid of, the jail time. Mm-hmm. And people don't know that there are Good Samaritan laws in place that protect, people that call and administer help and aid for someone that's overdosing or seeking medical attention. So we need to get that more out there. I don't know how we would. Maybe, I know in New York they're posting, billboards and going on the radio and TV to, let people know that it's okay to call 911 in the case of unfortunate overdose.
Well, and it's good that we're trying to, as you said, make people aware now, because I'm with you. I don't think people think about that the assistance is there. And I guess maybe some of the family members or caregivers might be afraid they would go to jail too.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And that's what it is. it's not the person that's overdosing, because they wouldn't be able to call 911 anyway, so it's the people that are there with them, the family members, and whoever's there is afraid of going to jail because of their association with this person, which is definitely not the case, and we need to become more aware of that.
So is the opioid the big problem that is the news is saying that it is? Is heroin this big problem? From your standpoint in recovery there, is it a huge issue still?
It's the biggest issue. Now, at Taylor Recovery Center in Houston, where I work, 85% of our clients are opioid users, whereas in the past it was more, alcohol and cocaine, but now it's primarily heroin, and it's becoming a big, big epidemic, not just in our state, but, across our country.
God, it's heartbreaking. It really is. It's heartbreaking.
It's horrible.
So if somebody's listening to this and they know they have a problem, maybe they're able to hide it. I don't know. What if they do? I think people are also afraid that if they go and ask for help just when they're not in a crisis necessarily, even though drug use is a crisis, that they're afraid to know how to navigate. What's your suggestion to people?
They need to reach out immediately. What we're seeing more often than not is, people wait too long, and they're starting to shoot up heroin and, this even more dangerous drug called fentanyl, and it's becoming too late, and that's why we're getting so many deaths. So if a family member recognizes someone is having trouble, or a coworker or anyone, they need to urge them to reach out to any treatment facility, or, even a therapist, psychiatrist who can guide them in the right direction. There are people that go out and do interventions to get these people into treatment. So these are the first steps that need to be taken to avoid more deaths that are happening across our country.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ryan Davis is the program director at Taylor Recovery. He's obviously an addiction specialist, joining us to talk about this. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for your time this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on.
All right, take care. And guys, the bottom line is call 911.
With the opiate problem. And to speak with us about that is addiction specialist program director at Taylor Recovery Center, Ryan Davis. Study people are not calling for help following drug overdoses. Let's talk to Ryan Taylor about that. Good morning, Ryan Davis. Good morning, Ryan. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, so, this opiate crisis, it is a problem. Where does this begin? How does this start? Is this because of, does this start with, people needing pain medication and then moving on to harder drugs? Does it start off with physicians that are too loose with the pad? How does this opiate crisis start? Let's start with that.
That is a great question, and it's exactly what you're saying, but there are also various reasons. It is because we are, some of our people are getting prescribed these very powerful pain medications, and sometimes end up not being able to afford them in the long run, or they're not working anymore, and they go to the, cheaper street drug, heroin, fentanyl to get them what they need. And other times it's just, some people start off using simpler drugs and just progress to the more, dangerous ones, the heroin, the Oxycontin, the oxycodone, and things like that. So, it's a various number of reasons why we're having this epidemic.
And so what is the deal with the fentanyl? In your understanding, this stuff is deadly, this stuff is powerful. How does somebody even get the idea to put that into a street drug where we're having this epidemic here in North Dakota as well?
Oh, yeah. So dangerous that, an amount as small as a couple of grains of sugar is deadly and lethal in some adults. That's it's alarming, and it's crazy that our first responders are, they're having to put on these suits and gloves just for the fact that if they go search a vehicle and they come across some fentanyl or something like that, they don't know what it is, and they could be at risk for overdosing just by touching it. It's crazy. It's a crazy drug, and we need to make more people aware of how dangerous it is.
I agree. What is causing people to not want to call in for treatment? We just had this situation a few weeks ago here in Western North Dakota. There was an overdose, and a guy had a person that had overdosed, just drove him into the college parking lot and left him there. Didn't call the authorities or the police or anything. What do you think? What's behind that?
So most people they panic, and then they hesitate first, then they panic, and then they have the fear of being arrested if they call the police. They call 911 and the police respond to someone overdosing. That's more often than not the reason why 911 is not being called, is the fear of arrest. And I wish that, most people were aware that there are, good Samaritan laws in place for these reasons in most states, that if you call just for someone to administer help for someone who's overdosing or who's in need of help, you're protected, under these laws. So I wish we would make everyone more aware countrywide of these laws.
Now, what happens if you are the supplier? If you're the person that gave the drugs to the patient, are those folks open to prosecution then? Might that be another complication of it? If that say, oh, I can't call the police because I gave this to them or I sold this to them.
Yeah, no, you're exactly, you're right. And that problem does arise, and I'm sure they are, in most cases, would not call for the simple fact that they are, scared of facing prosecution for giving the drug. But I wish, even if you did give the person the drug, you'd have a high enough moral standard to call and not want someone to die, rather than you facing the possibility of going to jail. That's why 911 needs to be called immediately. I don't care who you are, what you did. A life saving is much more worth it than you not going to jail. So it definitely needs to be called 911 immediately.
Call 911 immediately. Well, we are running out of time. Ryan Davis, this program director over at Taylor Recovery Center. Thank you so much. Where can people learn more about this?
They can go to our website, www.taylorrecovery.com, and we have a couple of blogs up there. And if they need to call, our number's up there, and we can give as much information as needed.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you. Thanks for helping us educate Western North Dakotans. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me on.